pressure,
Interesting.
Dave.
To know what my tells
You
are.
might have needed to tone it down a little bit. That's a lot of pressure.
This Lloyd guy, you got to meet this Lloyd guy.
So I'm going to put the pressure on him, though. I'll take it off for you for a moment. And I would love to hear from you, David, if you want to introduce Lloyd and tell us, why did you decide to bring him in on this part of the conversation?
I did a talk last year on masculinity, and I told you what that was about. And you showed up for that talk, and you had something else going on that night. You know, you made time for that, you know, to go across town, park, figure it out, when like the easier path would have been to just go do the thing that you needed to do, that you were responsible for. But you showed up for me as a friend, as a fellow man, to go, like, I think this talk is important, and I need to be there in support of somebody that's out there giving it. And
Absolutely.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, because it kind of encompasses what I was talking about in the talk.
Yeah.
It's how men need to support each other, particularly when we're being vulnerable, when we're exposing ourselves as something that somebody that's coming from a tough guy perspective might say, well, that's kind of weak or whatever.
Yeah.
Not if we're banded together and we're saying, no, actually, this is the way we consider men to be.
Yeah.
And I knew you to be that kind of man. And because I'd seen how you've been in the community, I'd seen the things that you stood up for, seen how you use your voice.
I appreciate
and,
that.
you know, just the presence. And I think we need to think about that as men, like our presence in a situation changes it, good or bad. And you showed up for me. And so that your presence made it a different experience.
Yeah. I appreciate that. So I originally showed up to heckle you. I had tomatoes ready. I was.
Well, as soon as I went out with my one liner that I led off with, you're like, oh, maybe I put the tomatoes back in my pocket.
I was like, but he was just so damn good. He was being vulnerable. He was letting it out. I was like, all right, maybe this isn't the time. Maybe this isn't the time. So you won me over, but your talk was important, and the talk was necessary. You know, I feel that it's it's a very important conversation to address how we as men can be vulnerable and unravel some of the poor teaching that we got when we were being reared as young men in this society. You know, that was teaching us when we had older men that were modeling to us what being a man means, and you're watching TV, you see the Levi jeans and the brawny guy cutting down the tree, and that begins to develop your approach to what you think being a man is. And I think the important thing is that being a man isn't a monolith. You know, there isn't necessarily a right way or a wrong way to be a man. You know, I think the key is that you have to get dialed into who you really are, your true north, what speaks to you, and your value system, and being able to stand on that. You know, and so that talk that you were giving that night, man, in what could have really been an uncomfortable space, because at that point, one reason I really wanted to show up for you is that because and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, your background isn't in public speaking, you know, and so a part of you hopping into that experience was you were also confronting your fear. And you're not only confronting your fear, getting in front of an audience of people, which most of society can't even do, like get up and talk in front of in a room full of people. So not only were you confronting your fear, which was brave enough, and that in itself is why I wanted to show up, you know, because that you have to rally around people that are trying to challenge themselves, you know, because that's how we create a safe space. And then you doing that unlocks that for somebody else, because there was somebody else in that room that needed to be set free. And so you getting up there and doing that not only helps you, but it's also helping somebody else, you know? And so it was important for me to show up just because of that. And then the topic that you chose behind it, you could have did something safe, you know, like opening yourself up to public scrutiny is a minefield just in general, because you can't control what comes back. You know, once you start putting your ideas and thoughts out there, You can't control what comes back. You know, it's going to be a very scary thing. And so not only were you putting yourself in that environment, you doubled down with a very uncomfortable topic, you know, and to address your own toxic masculinity, you know? So I thought it was a very powerful thing, man. I thought it was brave, courageous, and it was worthy of showing up for, you know, like you're my guy anyway. I try to show up for my people in general because like I run a nonprofit, I run my own organization, and it can feel like an island sometimes when you're putting yourself out there. Like nobody asked me to do the work that I'm doing. So when I run into, so sometimes it can be very difficult, you know, being a founder, doing these type of things can be very difficult and can be very lonely. And I really appreciate people like you and that join my board and people who come out and volunteer and help with things. It matters, you know, and it's that little thing that might push you to keep going. So I just want to be a part of pushing you to keep going, you know, and now you're here doing a podcast and digging even deeper, you know. So you're an incredible guy, man, and I'm better for knowing, you know. So yeah, I'm happy I can contribute to your journey in any way possible.
You know, what was interesting about that talk too is that the final version that you heard was kind of the third draft.
Yeah.
The first two were pretty harsh on guys. And there I was talking about kindness and compassion and being strong for those people who are vulnerable. And then I was coming in real strong, criticizing, and it kind of felt like a complaint.
Yeah.
The feedback that I got from people who were listening to my talk in the second version was that you're not really living up to the words that you're saying. You know, is it really kindness? Is it really compassion, the way that you're handling this? And I had to take some self-reflection and saying, like, if I am going to talk about this in a way that's going to make guys better,
Yeah.
have them really kind of be introspective and go, you know, it is my mental health, is the way that I'm coping with stress and that sort of thing, is that being reflected truly in the way that I want to present myself? And there I was being that,
Yeah.
right? Coming in with hostility.
Yeah.
And I realized that wasn't a way that we were going to make any progress on the topic that I was talking about. And furthermore, you know, I was one of 3 male speakers that night out of 11. So the rest were women, and and most of those women were talking about stories that involved a traumatic experience that was perpetrated by a man on them. Some pretty heavy things like sex trafficking and physical abuse, verbal abuse, all of that sort of stuff. And I kind of saw myself as providing a little bit of a safe space for them with the topic of my talk. We influenced each other in that way. And I think as men in society nowadays, when we're walking around, we have to be flexible as far as to say, like, what does my community need from me?
Yeah.
How do I need to be? Because right now, like, you know, men are warriors, men are storytellers, men are leaders. They have all of these different characteristics that they can really embody.
Yeah.
But do we need warriors in the form of physical violence? Probably not, unless we're unfortunately in a situation where we have to defend ourselves.
Right. These aren't the medieval times
No.
anymore. We're not running around with swords. And
so how does that warrior instinct, how does that get displayed? Right? Because it's in there. It's a part of who you are.
Yeah.
But how do we be good fathers, good husbands, good men in the community? And the way I was presenting that warrior instinct was through protection of those that are vulnerable. And you see this a lot nowadays of men kind of, I think, getting this power balance wrong, you know, to say, like, I have the power, so that means that I've got to use it against those that don't have it.
Right.
And it's the other, at least from my perspective, was the other way around.
Yeah.
Is to find those that don't have it.
Yeah.
And you're going to need to stand up in front of them, maybe take some hits for them because they can't protect themselves.
How can we empower people? How can we make room at our table to give somebody else voice? You know, that's what real strength is, you know, seeing individuals that may not have the capacity, may not have the information, may not have the resources, may not have the belief system that they can be more, and you lending of your power, status, position to pull somebody else up, and not being intimidated, because often we hide our insecurities through masculinity. We hide our insecurities through this display of toughness and how hard we can be, when we're really scared or we're really insecure and soft inside. And so I always say that a man that's truly in tune with themselves also understands that there's strength in your softness.
Right.
There's strength in your vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Lloyd, let me ask you this, and really this is a question for both of you, because as I sit here before two role models in our communities, as well as two specifically male role models, I'm very curious to know what you actually define masculinity as. And it's not the same as how you would define what it means to be a man. And you can take a moment with that, but I'm curious how you define masculinity, and is that the same or different what it means to be a man?
You know what? I describe masculinity as trying to protect those that you love, taking your family serious, being accountable when you make mistakes. But again, that's not just and it's interesting to unpack that, because those aren't just specifically masculine trait, or that you would prescribe as masculine traits that I just rolled out. So it's interesting. It's complex.
Mind for you, David?
More of a concept, which
Yeah.
is that our job is to create abundance and to create more opportunity and more good things, right? We have this aggressiveness. Like, how do we channel that into something that's productive and it builds and it creates a better place for people, whatever that is? And we adapt as men to the needs of the time and of the era. But you look at the greatest leaders that we've had, they've been successful in influencing the creation of much more available abundance for all of the people that are in their care. And it starts with your family, and it extends to your close community around you and all that sort of stuff. But then to set an example that can be translated into global abundance, right? You see those that are in need, you help them, right? You find a way to provide the things that they need, because when you do that for them, they'll do it for 100 others once they have attained that level of abundance. The cup's always overflowing, right? Just always, there's enough for everybody. There's enough love, there's enough resources, all that sort of thing. We have to use the gifts that we have as men, with our influence, with our strength, with the position that we have in our house and our community, to create that abundance for the people that depend on us.
Yeah.
And that isn't accomplished by taking it away from someone else, because you extend the boundary of what you consider to be your community to everyone that you meet. If you put somebody on the outside of that boundary, then you have conflict. Then you have things that result in some people losing. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not that the only way that we can be successful is if someone loses.
Yeah.
We have to have a view as men that all can succeed.
Yeah.
And that's maybe a little bit of a different view than what we see currently, of there's not enough to go around and we have to fight for it, right? I just don't believe that way.
Yeah.
I think there is enough for everybody.
Absolutely.
I find really interesting, and what I appreciate about your answers is, well, you highlighted a few values that are super clear to me: protection, taking care of family, and accountability, which, as you immediately highlighted, that is not inherently just a
masculine.
Thank you so much for that, because I think that highlights the fact that it's the spectrum.
Yeah.
Right. And we have more in common than not, I think, between men and women. So
Yeah.
I thought that was so beautiful. And David, for you, there is absolutely an inherent difference between men and women. And even though I think I could take you in like an axe throwing, I
From
that.
practice, yeah, but I mean, give me a month or two.
Fair enough. But there is a huge difference biologically, emotionally, which all that would be broken down in a different episode. But there's a difference between men and women. And I think that there is a gap right now in male role models for individuals coming up. I think that's very evident by, you and I have talked about this, Stephen, the type of leadership that sits in leadership positions right now, perhaps the lack of male leadership, even the lack of male school teachers. So why don't we transition a little bit? Because I know you both are very passionate about education.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear a little bit about what trends you're seeing in education when it comes to providing positive male role models for the kids coming up.
You know, so one thing I'll say is I don't necessarily feel like there's like in society at large, I don't necessarily feel like there's a lack of male role models. I think there are a lot of great people, especially with social media and all these podcasts. You have such great thought leaders that are out doing things that if you're looking for somebody, you can find it, you know? And so there are a lot of guys and people that inspire me. Like I'm a hip hop baby. So I look at people like a Killer Mike and that's out leading and doing some great things in the community. So I don't necessarily feel, so I do think there are positive male influences and role models you can look to now. But to your question and your point, I think once you start getting into certain industries, those influences that absolutely start to shrink. So to your point around education and trends we're seeing, that's specifically what led me into education and community work. Because in this arena, there is a deficit of positive male influences. When most service industries are driven by the opposite sex, you know, when you look at school teachers, when you look at social workers, counselors, things of that nature, most of those industries are typically female dominated. So there isn't a whole lot of there isn't as many men to have access to, and then the numbers shrink even greater when you talk about men of color. And so what led me into the work that I do today is that I wanted to be what I was lacking as a kid for other kids. You know, I didn't have those influences. I didn't really have a lot of positive male role models. I was raised in a single household. I mean, I was raised by a single mother household, raised 3 boys on her own. The most brilliant, powerful woman I've ever met, who taught me compassion, who taught me how to tap into my sensitivity and the importance of protecting women, especially women that you love. And if you do hurt that woman that you love or people that you love, you got to be accountable to fix that and make it better. You know, that's accountability. But I didn't see a whole lot of positive male role models. And I had a number of male role models that were teaching me very negative things, you know, and that's what at a certain point in my life led me to therapy, because I had to unpack those that rewire. I had to unpack that wiring, you know, and a lot of those toxic masculine things that I was even taught as a kid, because it was affecting me being able to have healthy relationships, you know, between me and my wife, or even with me and my male friends, you know. Because me also understanding how to be sensitive and vulnerable and how to make sure I'm caring for people, not just caring for myself. So I had to really dig in and unpack those things. But that drives my work, you know, because I wanted to be for kids that look like me, that example. Like, okay, we can at least look to Lloyd. Lloyd was at our rec program every single day, caring for us, mentoring us, teaching us. That's what led me into education. And as I went deeper into that field, I really saw that there weren't many people that looked like me there on the other side. So it even became even more important, because I was working with kids. A lot of my work is focused on marginalized communities. And I was working with a lot of kids that didn't have fathers in their home. So I became a surrogate father figure. And I really took that role serious. I really took it as a responsibility and obligation to make sure that these kids could at least cite one positive male figure in their life that believed in them, pushed them to do greater, and tried to instill some values in them that would help them positively contribute to the world. Um, so it's needed in all aspects of community work, especially in education. We still don't have a lot of male teachers, in the profession.
Yeah, and I'll double check the stat and put it in the show notes, but I believe as a nation we have more female pilots per capita than we have male educators, and
Wow. I'm not surprised. Yeah.
which there's a whole breakdown there of creating more opportunity for women,
Yeah.
all that stuff, which is wonderful. We love that, but we would love to see, of course, more male educators.
And I feel like a part of that is because, again, we're reared to be breadwinners. From the time we're little kids, we're taught it's your job to go home and bring home the bacon. So when you receive that type of information, the way that translates into your life is you're going after those high paying job opportunities. It's like my job to be a breadwinner. It's not my job to take care of people. It's my job to get out here and make as much money as possible and then die and hopefully leave some behind or take it all with me, one or the other, depending on your value system. So service industry type of jobs, those type of arenas aren't necessarily the most high paying. So I also think it makes sense when you have a generation of young men being taught to chase money, make as much money as possible. Your identity, your value is tied to how much money you make, where women are often promoted to be able to be more sensitive, and it's okay for you to be vulnerable, and it's kind of your position to take care of people that those industries would also be more highly populated with females, with women. So the trend based on how we receive information just also makes sense. I can see why it goes that way, but I think more of us need to know that you can live a good life, have a thriving career in those industries as well, and you're just as successful. It doesn't make you less of a man if you're a nurse or you're a teacher or a counselor, social, whatever, those professions do need us as well. They do need us.
Well, that's a perfect transition to a topic I specifically wanted to ask David about, because we talked about this a lot of it, about men and shame. And so what you were saying, Lloyd, in terms of this thought process that I have to make this amount of money,
Yeah.
take care of my family, and reach these goals and blah, blah, blah. David, you and I have had conversations of what it must feel like or could feel like as a man to not be able to be the main breadwinner. So I'm curious your thoughts around that and its effect on men's mental and emotional resilience.
I think I've always assumed and never really questioned it that I was supposed to be the one that provided financially for my family. So from the earliest days of dating, I was paying for dinner. It was and I was from the South too. I mean, you had these gentlemanly expectations on you that I don't know if anybody ever just told me, but you knew what the rules were,
Yeah.
right? You open up a door for a lady, which my wife loves, by the way, and you provide for things, right? You take care of stuff, and you pick up heavy things too, and that happens when that need happens. And so you get into adulthood, and then you get married, and life happens to you, and you find yourself moving from city to city based off, like in my case, my career. That means my spouse has to leave her job, find a new one in the new city. And none of this is something that like we sit around and unpack and all that. It's just assumed like this is my role in it, and this is hers. And I don't know really, I couldn't tell you where it came from with me other than I will take on the obligation myself, right? I'll take on the responsibility because that's what feels natural to me.
Has that evolved over time? You still feel that way?
I'd probably say it's gotten worse over time. You know, the higher the leadership position is, the higher the responsibility, the bigger the scale of the thing that you now say depends on you. If you don't get it done, it's going to fall apart. I've started to realize, and I'll just take it from the work context for an example. When I am away, things still function great. And I think that's just as a testament to the team. That's a testament to the environment that I have helped to create, is that it doesn't require me to be there constantly because my presence at home is more important. Being there for my family. It's not about the thing that you say or that sort of thing. It's just like a lot of times just being there matters. That's a realization, and that's a growth point for me, because I think there was a period of time where I kind of felt like, because I was providing, then that meant I was entitled to certain things, right? And you start to equate everything through a dollar exchange viewpoint, right? Like, you don't contribute financially to that I do. Shoot, if I don't do my job well and I get fired or whatever, it's all going to fall apart, right? It isn't, because it's not a realistic scenario. But a lot of guys are going to fall into a trap when they start to say that because I provide these things that are material, that is worth more than the things that my partner provides. And it probably just, if you dig deep into it, there's the shame of being the type of guy that doesn't provide, right? A deadbeat.
Yeah.
You hear about these guys all the time. Don't take care of their kids, walk away from their family or whatever. You've heard these kind of stories and you're like, well, that's not going to be me.
Yeah.
So great, it's not you, but don't over project that stuff onto yourself to say, now that means I'm extra entitled to things.
Absolutely.
And then I think the relationship suffers because of that kind of stuff. I think there is a lot of shame that guys carry around that impacts their mental health on kind of a subconscious basis, right? Because like decisions that we make, particularly the reactions that we have to things, are usually us avoiding some reality, something that threatens our ego in some way, right? And the more that we understand that through a process of like becoming vulnerable, you mentioned therapy, that's a discipline, right?
Yeah.
It's the ability to sit down with another human being who's not going to judge you and be able to say the thing that you would never say.
Yeah.
Because when you say it and it gets out about you, people are going to think differently about you. They're going to think that you're not as good of a man, you're not as good of a human being, all of these sorts of things. And we all have those things, but we're conditioned to bury them and to cover them up with a facade or a performance.
This isn't your normal sponsorship ad. This episode is brought to you by our friends down at Alchemy 48, our favorite speakeasy in downtown Mesa, Arizona. I sat down with their bar program manager, or as he's better known, the director of discretion, Brandon Becker, for a conversation. We talked about craft, community, and why a great cocktail might just teach you something about being human. Pulled a few of my favorite moments from that conversation, and I hope you enjoy them just as much as I did.
I think it's difficult for a lot of us to recognize those among us who actually make life worth reflecting upon. And so I think that being a communicator, even if it's in reflecting others, is, like you said, a superpower. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and they're a young person, which I don't necessarily see this a lot, especially in the younger people, maybe because I'm old, I don't know. But they're actively listening to me at a bar, music up, drinks in hand, listening to me. And I'm like, I stopped myself because I can just go.
Yeah.
I stopped myself. Brother, that is your superpower. That makes people bond. I can chatter, you can chatter. I don't know if you walked by a group of people sitting at brunch and realized that out of a thousand words they've said nothing and heard maybe even less. To be able to listen to someone and understand what they're saying or their intent, or even just learn from their body language, however it comes, that is a superpower, to be able like to take something outside of yourself and then make it part of your knowledge. And that can sound really selfish, but if we're all doing it, then we're all improving whatever our self is.
Yes. Also, am I just now in this moment realizing the definition of the word speakeasy? Like creating a space where it's easy to speak to people in an intimate.
I'm glad that
Is
you
this
said
happening?
it out loud.
Is this happening right now?
If I were to do
35 years later?
if I were to do it, it might seem pedantic. But no, I love that you came to that, because you can't explain that to people. They have to experience it.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I love our off nights is because I can have real conversations and people can speak, and it's wild. I work in one of the pretty rare circumstances in which I speak to strangers every single day.
Yeah.
And we live in our fish bowls. We speak bubbles to each other, but none of it makes it out, and none of it really matters, right? We're not gaining anything from each other. So I think that people in the service industry, if we take the opportunity, some of us just do our job, but if we take the opportunity to recognize the power that comes from interacting with strangers, and if you can make that meaningful.
Your team.
Yes.
So I don't know them at all. I
Sure.
know you
Right.
for the amount of today's conversation, but everyone seems like they truly care about showing up and coming to work.
Yes. Everyone here.
I just wanted to comment on that because I think sometimes the service industry, food and beverage, bars, they can get a bad rap.
Yes.
And as someone who's worked in that world, for good reason. Sometimes there's restaurants in certain spaces you don't really feel proud or excited to show up at. But it seems to me that you have an incredible team that wants to be here. You serve a lovely product, and your customers thus far being pretty cool.
Most of us, the ones that are here, part of it is a labor of love. We're doing it for each other, and or we're doing it for the craft, and or we're doing it for the people.
Yeah.
For some of us, this is our social life, if you will.
Ooh.
And when we reflect, I see it starting to be reflected back now from our clientele.
Yeah.
Whether it's the same people who come back here to get more of not just the cocktail, but like interacting with myself, interacting with John, being able to, sit in this comfortable environment and have a different, different music, different atmosphere, different feels, different conversations, right? The speaking being easier, if you will. I'm already seeing that.
If we really understood how little people actually care about what we're going through or because we get so caught up in like everybody has their own stuff that they've got going on. And even if you go viral on social media, it's going to last a day, maybe a couple of weeks, and then they're going to move on. But we're so protective of this image. We're so protective of have to portray this or portray that. When really all that really matters, man, is those people in your household and how are you showing up for them?
Right.
that's all that matters.
Double tap on that kind of this, I suppose, ideal image that young men maybe are shooting for, or some expectation that they have. And David, you mentioned shame a couple times. I think there's also just ultimately so much, I imagine, confusion. And I'm not often around men that are under the age of 30. However, I have spoke at some community colleges and high schools, and I do just get a sense of confusion from them of beyond the typical I'm a teenager.
Yeah.
They just don't seem to know what they're supposed to be going for or how they're supposed to be showing up as a man. And I'm curious your guys' thoughts too around dating and relationships. So, woman, if it wasn't obvious to the cameras, I feel in today's day and age that I can go make as much money as I want. I feel that there's every opportunity open to me that I could possibly want to go for. I could go for any degree, literally nothing holding me back. And science is so great. I could go have a baby by myself if I wanted to. So we've talked about this. I actually literally don't technically need a man for anything.
Mm.
And I think that there are plenty of women, including high school age, that recognize that.
Yeah.
So I suppose through that lens of where we are today and what's all possible, how do you think that's affecting the younger male generation in terms of how they are building relationships?
You know, it's interesting. So I have adult kids. So I have a 24-year-old son. I have a 19-year-old daughter. And it is interesting to observe them adulting and navigating into the adult world and starting to develop and form relationships. Even outside of the examples you just gave, like they're trying to make matches and meet people in this world where social media exists and it's creating this fear of missing out. So I think it's harder for them to actually choose a mate because it's like, okay, if I choose, but I got I have 2,000 followers on my Instagram. There's half of them are other females. So I'm going to choose this one and I'm going to miss out on all these other 1,000 that are liking my pics as well. Where I tell my son all the time, back when I was his age, we had to go out and actually court somebody. We had to go out and walk up and talk to you, introduce yourself. It wasn't through private messages. So it's fascinating to watch how they navigate relationships in general. One thing that I do give my son credit for is that I feel like we are at least coming up in a generation where they're coming up in a generation where things like therapy and terms like toxic masculinity aren't as taboo. You know, there are discussions like this going on that they do have access to. So they are getting better information or at least having access to better information, you know, in a way that we didn't have. You know, therapy was a very looked down upon thing when I was a kid. We weren't going to therapy, you know. Yeah. And I guess because I'm probably the typical people that today and at my age that I'm around are people that embrace therapy. So I kind of have a different whole worldview about these things. I'm sitting with a guy with Dave who literally did a whole speech around addressing his own toxic masculinity. So I know so I believe there's areas where it's still not as where people aren't embracing it as much, but I'm also around a lot of people that are. You know, I'm around a lot of people that are trying to do the work on themselves. I'm around a lot of people that are trying to address their negative traits, you know, and trying to unpack their baggage and trauma. What I tell my kids is as they're moving into this dating world and starting to try to choose a mate, the first question they should ask is, how are you addressing your trauma? How are you working on your trauma? You know, are you going to therapy? Like, what are you doing? And I tell them it's a red flag. If somebody is completely against therapy, I'm like, that's a red flag to me, you know, because we all got our stuff. Work on yourself because it's essential to have healthy, quality relationships. And our job is to try to lessen the negative impact that we have on the people and the things that we say we love. And we're not always going to do it perfect. You know, I've been with my wife 26 years. I've had plenty things I've had to address and plenty things I've had to unravel. I put her through a lot of unnecessary hurt and pain. And she's truly one of the strongest, most loving individuals I ever met, you know, changed my life, you know, and she brings the best out of me, you know, but I needed somebody because of how I came up and I was raised in an environment that really taught you not to take care of women, not to care for women. You know, women were just objects or playthings to be used.
If you don't mind, could I just ask and share whatever you're comfortable with? You had said earlier you were raised by your mother,
Yeah.
2 brothers, and it sounded like she had a massive positive impact on your life. But now I'm hearing this unsaid
Because she was a female,
Yeah.
you know, and so, but you always need those male figures to try to attach to, you know, and so so if you don't have them present in your environment, you're going to get those examples in the media, you know, you're going to get those examples through music. And I came up in the and I'm listening to Snoop Dogg, and I'm like, okay, that's what being a man looks like. That's how you're supposed to treat women. That's where you're getting that information from. And the males in my life were also reinforcing some of that behavior. Like, nope, this is you're supposed to be a player. You're supposed to be this. You know, you don't take women seriously. And so it took a lot of work for me to unravel that, because I didn't want to lose my relationship and this woman that I love and that I care about. And so I had to do the work. I had to start doing work on myself.
Was that the, I suppose, turning point or moment of this self-awareness you had of meeting your wife or future wife? I don't know the exact timeline, but
Future wife.
things were going on and you said, I
Yeah.
don't want to lose this one. Was that the moment where you said, I as an individual, I as a man, I have work to do and I need to go?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This was around 30. Let's say it was probably around in between like 25 and 30 is where I really started digging in and trying to unpack what it meant for me not to have my father in my life, because what also happens is that you grow up and you think, you get to a certain point and you reach a certain level of success and you create a callus, right? You're like, oh, I didn't need him. Like, I didn't have a great relationship with my dad growing up. Him and my mom split when I was 10 years old, and you think you're okay because I'm in an environment of also other young men that don't have their fathers around. And so one thing that we've done, especially in a lot of inner city minority communities, is we've masked trauma as culture. Like we none of us have fathers. Like, that's okay. We don't need them. But the reality is that in life, you get one biological mom, you get one biological father. You can get step parents and all of those things, which are great. But that biological relationship always holds space, whether it's a good relationship or a bad relationship. It always holds space in some shape, form, or fashion. I realized later on that even in my dad's absence, he was still informing my parenting because I wanted to be the opposite of him. I didn't want to. I dug in so deep on staying around for my kids because I didn't want my kids to grow up without a dad like I did. So he was informing my parenting even in his absence. So that shows in itself that this person, that even when they're not there, still holds a space in your life. And a part of what led me to therapy was to start unpacking that, because I was like, I don't know how subconsciously my relationship with my dad is affecting me. I don't know, like it may be. And so I need to start digging in and unpacking that so I can understand my own trauma, my own triggers, so I can do the best that I can to be a good example for my kids, to be a good husband to my wife, and it's taking intentional work for me, and a lot of headaches and tears, but we've been able to manage and create such a beautiful life together, such a loving life. And when you find somebody that can love you despite your flaws and work with you through the tears and the pain, like there's nothing like it, and it's worth preserving, and it's worth addressing your trauma. So
I need to not let you off the hook on something that you did and combine a couple of things from both of you, because you just, and to paraphrase, you said, what do I need a man for? Right. And you just said, I grew up without a father.
yeah.
And you're talking about going through like a lifelong experience of learning how to be a husband and a father in your own right.
Yeah. Without an example.
When you didn't have that example. And he's answering your question.
You're
right?
exactly right.
Because I do think that there is this attitude out there, like, what are men good for? Right? All you do is you screw a whole bunch of shit up and you just make everything a problem for everybody else. Maybe in the bad examples, yeah. And you can certainly pull those out and say, these are the reasons why we can be critical of men. But then we find, like, in the absence of men, for young men, for young women, little girls who are growing up, like, when that father is not there, what does that do?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a bridge that needs to be built between all of the people that are kind of struggling with this issue of what's the role of men in society, to at least understand that when we get it wrong, it's bad. Okay. And it can go really wrong. But when we're not there, when we're absent, that's when it goes the worst. There's the problem of, of masculinity displayed the wrong way. And then there's the absence of masculinity to begin with. And that hurts. That hurts because for years and years and years, like if you would have had a father in your life, and it's, a lot of, if this happened, whatever, like your life would have been a whole lot different. Your relationship with your family would have. So I really hesitate to kind of like throw all the men under the bus, because we can see like that we have to be there because so much good can happen when we're there. How do we show up for that?
And I agree with you. But I also feel there's because also you do have some women that single mothers that do an amazing job raising quality young men, quality kids. Because I do also give my mom a lot of credit for leaving my dad because he was abusive, And so sometimes you do have to know how to, when it's time to get out of an environment and show your kids that. Because even when you said, okay, having my dad around, definitely my life would have been different, but I may have become an abuser as well, because that's what was being modeled to me, So a quote that I heard that really always sticks with me is that kids don't need perfect parents, they need happy parents. And so even where I think the most important thing was not necessarily even for my mom and dad to stay together, but for them both to have been able to work on their trauma, as I keep saying, to make sure that they were happy and were modeling to us happiness. I didn't see a whole lot of that as a kid growing up. I saw fighting in the household. I saw all of those things, and so it and so I just think I think healed parents is an important thing to be modeled to kids as well, like not that you're perfect, but that you're doing the work to be healed and you're doing the work to be happy. That's the best gift to pass on, is like how to be happy.
And earlier you were talking about what you and your wife and your family have gone through and the tears and the frustration, and to me that's just effort.
Yes.
Some of that needs to be negative, but when I hear we're going through it, there's been a lot of tears, there's been a lot of trauma, sometimes that's the effort of parents.
Absolutely. There's been no shortage of effort in my relationship, and again, and I give my wife all the kudos and credit in the world. She was just such a blessing to me.
That's what we're trying to highlight too, is whether it's what I love what you're saying about happiness, because happiness for the parents, it doesn't necessarily mean the parents stay.
Yeah.
There might have to be a separation.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we can't just completely create absent male role models.
Absolutely.
That's a really important part of the equation.
Absolutely. And to your point, like I've always felt it was my job as the man in this relationship, the man in this household, to also model that, the model trying to take care of your family, taking care of the people that you love, being accountable, being responsible, and showing up. I haven't missed any days, showed up every day, and being that constant presence and doing my best to lead with love. I wanted my kids to really understand, I know your dad loves you. Like he loves you. He believes in you. He's going to fight with you, ride with you every single day. If there's one person that's there through thick and thin, he's going to be there. He's not going to abandon you, And that was just a very important thing because I think that gives kids security, gives them confidence, helps them believe in how high their ceiling is, you know, what that they can accomplish anything. And so being a trying to be the best dad I can be has always been so important. Has been so important, you know, so important.
I learned a lot about being a dad by reading a book that was written by a guy who was dying, and he was dying really quickly from brain cancer.
Yeah.
And he was given 3 months to live, and he wrote a book. It was a guy named Eugene O'Kelly, and he was the former president CEO of KPMG back in the early 2000s. So he wrote a book called Chasing Daylight, and it was kind of a life-changing book for me. But he described winding down relationships with those who are close to him by trying to capture these perfect moments with them, you know? And these are the things that like stick out in your memory that were just like you got that, right? You got this perfect memory with someone by being there and being present for them. And I started to, you know, say, well, I'm not going to die in 3 months, but how can I live my life that way?
Yeah.
Especially like with my kids, because they're going to remember the good things. They're going to remember the bad things. And I just remember one time with my little boy when he was probably about 7, and we had gotten advance notice that he was going to be recognized at the assembly, get some award. And so we were allowed to go. We sat in the back. He had no idea we were there. And I just was watching him. And they called his name. He ran up to the front and he goes up on stage. And then I really was struck by what he did. He looked for us. You could see his eyes like scanning. And then he saw me and my wife and he locked onto us. And then we got one of those perfect moments.
Yeah.
Like we captured one of them right there. And if we weren't there, he still would have looked. He wouldn't have seen us though.
Yeah.
But he's going, you know, where's my mommy? Where's my dad?
Yeah.
And to see us there, like supporting him. I mean, it seems like a little thing, you know, you like take a little bit of time off work to go to the pep rally in the morning, but those things matter. And there wasn't, well, some magical thing I said to him or anything like that, but it means something.
Yeah.
And you can think about how you apply that just in your walk as a man, as a, you know, with your family and everything like that. And saying like these perfect moments matter. And look, like we are not 100% happy in my house because I don't know that that's realistic. There are times when there is conflict because it's natural when you got stressed out, busy people that are all kind of living in the same household.
And me and my wife are both alphas.
Right.
You know?
It's not about the conflict, it's how you resolve.
Yeah.
And our kids have always seen us resolve. You know, I remember how it felt when my mom and dad were fighting. And that was something even today, I still feel that like kind of inside my chest, you know, just like my whole world could come apart.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't realize like the trauma that you inflict on your kids by disrupting the stability in your household with that conflict.
Yeah.
It's very important that, you know, if happiness is the ideal, you aspire to that. But the reality is you're going to have those times. And the way you step up and repair that and have your kids be witness to it, models for them, like the safety and security of the house.
Yeah.
And what they can then go on to recreate in their own place. Relationships, especially modern ones, they do fall apart. I mean, divorce, and it's important to consider too, divorce is considered to be one of those adverse childhood events, ACEs, that sociologists and stuff track. And it is the most common ACE that children experience. You know, alcoholic parents and stuff like that. It is considered to be something that is traumatic to children because the stability of like their parents' relationship is very important. And if you experience the conflict between your mother and your father, I experienced it with mine. It's incredibly destabilizing, and it's still like a flashbulb memory in my mind now.
Yeah.
And So are all relationships going to work out? No. I mean, that's not realistic. But I think, especially like our role as men of being the ones who can like de-escalate a situation, not let our own ego get in the way, show our partner how much we value them and we can't live without them. That goes a long way to start to build the discipline in your relationship of how do you work through these things? How do you get past them? When you bring kids into the equation, you really up the stakes. The behavior that you model, that has a bigger impact now.
Yeah.
More lives are influenced by how you're going to work this out. So I can't really remember, like, through all of my experience of being married for 16 years now, there's conflict. The resolution was the key.
Yeah.
And for our kids to see that resolution is important.
Because it also reaffirms to them it's not always going to go smooth. And I think a part of this generation of kids that have been raised by helicopter parents that are trying to address all the problems and eliminate all the obstacles the kid has to go through, it affects their resilience. You have to know everything's not always going to go your way, and you got to have resiliency. You got to find solutions, and you got to know how to stay in the fight, stay in the game, and not let the fact that a couple things didn't go your way detour you or ruin you, and I kind of feel like that's a part of to this question about what being a man is or being masculine. Those things are part of it. Being that example, being that role model, being a part of that support system, contributing, and contributing doesn't always mean financially, contributing means picking up the kids sometimes so the wife doesn't have to. The contributing means staying up and doing the homework, financial is definitely a part of it, but that's not the whole thing. And sometimes, to the point you said earlier, there are times we get wrapped up in the financial aspect of contributing and we feel entitled. Look, this is what I'm doing or what I'm not doing. The fact that if you aren't contributing financially to the level you want to, that can also lead to your insecurity or you feeling less than. So really, really understanding contributing is much more than that,
Yes, I would say a hot tip for all the gentlemen out there in terms of contributions. If you do laundry, have a good night. That's all I'm saying. What you're talking about in terms of resiliency, though, in our last few minutes here, I'd be very remiss if I didn't bring up a really shocking statistic that I read in preparation for this, which is that young men are committing suicide at 3 times the rate of young women. And I was frankly shocked by that. And I want to take just a few minutes here at the end of our conversation and go around and just talk about, from y'all's perspective, what do people need to hear, whether that's the educators of the young men, the parents of the young men, the mentors of the young men? What knowledge, wisdom, insight would you provide to those individuals that are having the influence of the young men coming up that would perhaps help strengthen their resilience, or those young men themselves? Words of wisdom.
The thing that has really driven me and helps me today is, one, give yourself grace. Don't expect to be perfect. Know that it's okay to make mistakes. Know that this world is better with you in it than without you in it. And I think that for those people that are teaching young men, teaching young people, mentoring, I think the important thing is to really create the message and create examples that they matter, that they're important, that you believe in them, and that it's okay not to be okay. I think that's an important thing. And I think that's what, and because I think when we have those tough moments and we're in our heads and something didn't go right, or we have these things inside of us that we haven't yet learn how to deal with or how to address or how to unpack our own trauma. I think just being able to tell yourself it's okay to not be okay. Tomorrow's another day, and give yourself 24 hours with any emotion, whether it's happiness, sadness, anger, fear, whatever. To give yourself 24 hours, and then tomorrow's a new day. Then start over tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new opportunity for you to try it again, and tomorrow is going to be a better day. Like, know that, understand that, and it's okay to have feelings. It's okay to experience the ups and downs, because that's a part of being human. Like, it's okay to be you're having feelings. That just means you're human and you want to be human. Because without those feelings and without those emotions and without allowing yourself to be human, you don't experience all of life. You can't really experience love. You can't really experience happiness without knowing sadness. You can't really, you have to open yourself up to the entire human experience. Give yourself grace. Know it's okay to not be okay sometimes. Give yourself 24 hours with any emotion. Tomorrow's another day. And to get up and fight the good fight again. And do your best to be present. Don't take what you have for granted. Don't take the moment for granted. Don't take the people that are showing up for you at their speeches, inviting you to a podcast. Like, don't take those relationships, don't take those things for granted. Say thank you, be appreciative, do your best to be in the moment.
You snuck a word in there earlier that I noticed, which was loneliness. And I think it's really tempting for men to embrace that.
Yeah.
And say, and it's an ego thing, but to say I'm better off alone.
Yeah.
Right? I can do this myself. And it's interesting to think about it that way, that loneliness and depression is alluring, but it does pull men in. It's pulled me in to say, like, I feel more comfortable here. This is something that I recognize.
Yeah.
This is something that I know. And it feels like home.
Yeah.
And, suicide seems like such an alien concept, and then people do it all the time. So people are processing and logically arriving at a conclusion that they are no longer going to stay alive, and they're making that decision. And having come face to face with that through dealing with chronic pain for years and years, like, I kind of understand it.
Yeah.
And what has helped me with resilience is to embrace service to others and to be important in other people's lives, starting with my own children's lives.
Yeah.
And then extending to the community around me that, I do have a positive role to play there, that I am needed, because there has to be something that pulls you away from the comfort of depression and isolation, because I think you have to understand how depressed mind works is like, that's where you want to be. You don't, in those times, like, you don't want to be happy. Like, you don't want to experience positive things. It's just if you've not experienced it, it's really difficult to explain, but you have to start to understand, like, how you work and set a safety structure around you of knowing what's going to pull you back into the light, what's going to bring you back. Like, my kids, my wife, the things that I'm involved with, those are the things that matter. And I think for young men, especially, that really haven't found their purpose yet, there's nothing around them that's going to combat the loneliness. There's not a group of their peers that they can depend on, because we're not wired that way to, like, kind of, step up for each other. Like, especially, like, now that I moved out of my parents' house when I was just turned 17 years old. And I moved to college town, and then I moved out of state, and then I moved to a different state. Like, especially when we're more mobile now, like all the guys from back home that I grew up with, it could be my lifelong friends are like distant memories now. So we don't, in modern society, we don't have this safety structure around us anymore. And young men are going to have to be proactive to build that, to be involved in their community, to like, by doing that, they'll start to, because we were talking about dating earlier, like, how are you going to date when you got nothing to offer? When you haven't gone through a process of learning who you are and what the ways that you want to contribute, like, how do you connect with somebody? Like, if it's just superficial, if it's just like what you see on a profile, like there's no depth to that. So it's always going to be temporary and transactional. So you talk about working on yourself. There's the internal self and there's the external self that you got to work on too, of like build your resume of who you are, like those are the sorts of things that help to like defeat the isolation, the loneliness, the things that young men especially get trapped in. But we're seeing young women in the same boat. Young women are committing suicide at alarming rates too. And that's our social isolation that's driving that. So my advice is you've got to have to create a discipline of forcing yourself out of your comfort zone. And that comfort zone can be the dark place that you're hiding in.
I think I've had a realization through this conversation in that more than anything, I'm grateful for you both, because I think that you're of a really key generation right now that can have such a massively positive impact. It's much older generation. They're not going to be the ones to change it, but we can pull so much wisdom from there.
Mm-hmm.
And individuals that are younger are still learning. I'm not seeing individuals that are in your generation, or not as many examples, except the two gentlemen sitting in front of me that are having this conversation. And I'm just realizing that in this moment. And I think that you guys have the most opportunity for positive impact, not just for the individuals coming up, but the people that are your peers. So I just want to thank you both for your vulnerability and your insight here. And hopefully everyone gets something from this conversation. And I absolutely feel as the priest coming out, just like I've talked to you.
And you're a fabulous host. Fabulous host. Great questions. Thank you.